Let's talk about system and infrastructure lifecycle management. Part of your job as the IS auditor is to see, okay, they had a plan. Did they follow their plan when they were developing software, when they were developing systems, when they were developing infrastructure? And how did they manage their plan? And part of being an IS auditor is also to know just some of the basics of project management. So let's talk about when you are doing system and infrastructure lifecycle management. And lifecycle, of course, means from is this even feasible all the way to putting it in production and maintaining it and everything in between. We need to first of all determine what is the business case for this. Again, remember, everything that IT does should support the business objectives. So what is the business case for this particular software we need to develop, this particular system we need to put into place, this particular site we're going to build? Why are we doing it? What even is the business case for this? And then we need to look and see, okay, what project management framework are we going to use? What governance practices are we going to use? And then as we have this whole thing going along, we need to be reviewing the project. How's it coming along? We also need to see what control mechanisms are in place. Remember, a control is anything from a policy, a procedure, or some kind of technical configuration or software to make sure that unauthorized changes don't happen, and to make sure that anything that happens we know about and we can mitigate risk. We also need to look at the development and the testing processes. And we need to see, okay, what are you doing? How are you actually developing the system or the software? And what are you doing to test it along the way to make sure that it actually is going to work at the end? And then, are we ready to roll it out? And then, all right, we're ready to roll it out. Now let's roll it out. Let's migrate to it. However we're going to deploy it. So when we look at the life cycle, you start out with just a feasibility study. In a large organization, with the feasibility study, you're trying to prove that it's even worth it to go into this. And a large organization will give somebody a chunk of money, like even $100,000. Okay, find out if this multi-million-dollar project is even worth doing. And what's the pros and cons? What's the feasibility? What is the business value that we hope to get out of it? How long do you think it might take? What kind of resources will be involved? What kind of impact will it have to everything and everybody? So we start with that feasibility study. From there, we take a look at it and we go, okay, this looks pretty darn good. All right, okay, let's try it, or let's try it in pilot, or let's try it in a smaller sort of a smaller scenario, or let's just go for it. So we start with a feasibility study to prove that it's worth taking the risk to even try to do this project, whatever it is. The next thing you need to do is gather requirements. Now, gathering requirements, this is where you involve those business analysts, those system analysts, those BSAs, BAs, SAs, whatever you want to call them. With the business analysts, we're trying to find out what it is we need. And when you gather requirements, the BAs will be interviewing the stakeholders, the project sponsor, the main managers, and that could be anything from phone calls and phone conferences to face-to-face interviews. What is it that you need? And when you're doing the gathering requirements, you're not so much showing what the solution is. You want to know what people need. You want to know what management needs. You want to know what the end users need. Sometimes you'll have a focus group. Okay, so you'll have like different people, like you'll have maybe a salesperson and a department manager and someone who inputs data, just to find out their whole take on this idea. Like maybe we're going to have some in-house product that will make it easier for us to sell something to our customers. And so then you get the people involved and you just start talking with them and you interview them. But when you prepare for this, you have to have like all the questions in place. And you'll often follow up with additional phone calls or emails, and you thank them and all this. From the IS auditor's perspective, requirements gathering is tricky. So many people don't do it well. Mainly because the people who want something generally only have the vaguest notion of what they want. Then they certainly have no idea of what it will take. Many clients, I've seen so many clients have very unrealistic expectations, or they start immediately having the method and the technology and the solution. Well, let's find out what you really need, first of all. It takes a while, and it takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of talking to people and just finding out stuff. When you've gathered the requirements, the system analyst has to be able to translate those requirements into very concrete use cases that the application developers can actually use, because there's so much opportunity for confusion here. And this is where there's so much opportunity for scope creep. I mean, I've been in plenty of things where the client will say, well, we just need something that is like this, and it's already half done. And when I've gotten in there and looked, it's not half done. It's like this much done, but the client thought it was half done, or only this much is usable. And then they say, oh, well, not only do we need it like this, but it has to be accompanied by that. Oh, well, you didn't say that before. Oh, well, sorry, my bad. You know, so you have to know really ahead of time. And they generally don't know. Your clients and your customers don't know. And realize that in a large organization, clients and customers are not necessarily outside people. They are the departments within the company, or the business units within the company that the IT department is creating a system or an application for, so that the business itself can function. It's so often as that is who your customer is, not outside customers that aren't part of your organization. So gathering requirements, extremely important. You should take a number of people to do it, and you should really think out, okay, what is it we're going to ask them? When you are auditing this, you need to see what process did they go through. And there should be in a large organization some templates people can follow. Ultimately, requirements gathering turns into very, very clear specifications for the next phase, which is design. Well, and planning and design. So when we design, we're actually now creating like high-level diagrams, what this thing's going to do. We're creating use cases, and in software development, there are actual things called use cases, where you actually draw like little stick figures, and you say, this actor needs to do that. So we need to be able to get from the requirements these very concrete specifications and information flows and diagrams and use cases. After that, we then see, okay, are there any technologies that we're going to select to use to develop this thing? Or is there anything off the shelf that we can purchase as part of this? And when we go through a selection process, we have to really vet the things we're working with. When I was in Africa and working on a health informatics project, the director of the project had already vetted all kinds of off-the-shelf products and finally decided none of these suit our need, we're going to home grow it. And so you spend a lot of time looking at, okay, what is it that we have already? Can we use any of it? Is there anything off the shelf? Oh, okay, we have to home grow it. What tools will we use? Then we actually get down to the development of it. And this is where the application developers, if this is software, are actually writing the code. And, or if it's a system that we're developing, this is where we're actually installing operating systems, loading on applications, and loading on whatever tools in the operating system, or creating virtual machines, or just building whatever this thing is. During the development, it is really crucial to, along the way, always check, is this really still what we wanted, what they originally wanted? And that's where the system analyst and the developer have to always work together. Is this still where we want it to be? Are we going in the right direction here? As we're developing, finally, we're starting to get ready for the rollout and for the deployment. That's when we configure, and of course, we've been testing all the way along. And we have a test plan. As early as our early planning stages in our design, we've developed a test plan, and we're testing every step of the way. Now we're finally ready to roll this thing out, to deploy it, to implement it. And usually you'll deploy like in a prototype, or rather in a small pilot, and then you'll roll it out in phases. You don't generally just drop it on everybody. You roll it out, check it, do a few tweaks, then roll it out here, and then check it, a few tweaks, and then you slowly roll the whole thing out. All the while having a method for rolling back and reverting back to the old system in case things aren't working. When we've rolled it out, you don't just simply throw it over the fence and say, okay, maintenance team, your job, operations, your job. You still have to warranty and support the work. Like I've been, in projects where the developers, they write something, then they basically throw the code over the wall and say, okay, you guys install it, I'm done for the day. And they just don't think about it again. And they don't realize that they need to be there to fix something because something broke. I mean, plenty of times I've been there. We've installed it in a small sort of pilot and totally broke the system. And now we've got to have the developer or a developer figure out what was wrong. And sometimes the things that break are really unexpected and really kind of weird. And then they have to track down what happened. Same thing if you're not just installing an application, but a whole system or an infrastructure. Whoever developed this thing has got to be standing by ready to support it and warranty it and fix it and tweak it. And then eventually the maintenance gets shifted over to whatever operations team is involved in maintaining it. So when we start out, when we have the feasibility study, here is an example where we're trying to describe what is the problem this thing is trying to fix, what's the scope, what are the risks, and what solutions or actions are we proposing here. Then we write a business case. We say, okay, this is the reason why we want to do it, and this will be this is an opportunity for the business to save X amount of money, to expand in this market, to solve a customer problem, to solve a department flow problem, to solve something, or to improve something, or to expand or improve or increase something. And so here's our opportunity. Here are the other alternatives. Here's the cost, the benefits. Here's the various analyses. And then also, when we take a look at this thing, we go, okay, well, what could the benefits be? And you need to realize that sometimes you don't know the benefits until way later. And for that reason, recognizing that sometimes you don't realize there will be plenty of benefits to something that you just don't realize until a year later, 2 years later, or 6 months later. So the benefits realization themselves must be managed because we don't always know in our plan what the benefit will be, just like we don't always know what the problem will be or what we'll encounter. So it might take a while. So we have to just keep an eye on the benefits and manage the benefits. And when we take a planned approach so that we can look ahead, we can say, when we get farther down the road, we can say, okay, well, based on that plan, what were benefits? Were there any unexpected benefits that came out of this? And so in managing the benefits itself, you have to look beyond just the immediate life cycle of the project. Maybe because we did this project, it affected some other change, or positioned us to be ready in advance for some environmental change. So these are the things that we need to keep an eye on and be able to manage and be able to prove that, hey, well, remember that thing that we did 2 years ago? A few years later, we realized continued benefits. So when you are auditing all of this stuff, make sure, did they have that feasibility study? What were the results of that? Did they adequately gather requirements? Because poorly gathered requirements or insufficiently gathered requirements will cause all kinds of scope creep, feature change, confusion. We have to redo things, delays, costs, etc. And then were we able to write a business case? And then did we translate the requirements well into the design with constant communication between the analysts and the developers? And then did we do testing all the way along? Did we plan for testing all the way along? And then how was this thing rolled out? And finally, what benefit did we realize immediately and down the road?